Today, and let's bring in our expert panel to weigh in on this and some other stories happening as well, including the Middle East, where there are new developments with the Houthis. Behnam Ben Taleblu, Senior Director of the Iran Program Foundation for Defense of Democracy. It's good to see you, Behnam, and Brent Sadler, former Pentagon official and Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. So here we have Poland, NATO member, triggering Article 4. President Trump will speak to the president of Poland, but he also put up this tweet, which I think is, very well phrased and very in brand with what President Trump, how he kind of gets right to the point. What's with Russia violating Poland's airspace with drones? Here we go. What is with it, Brent? I mean, clearly it's an escalation, and clearly Putin's playing games again. How much further is he willing to take this testing of the red lines when you have Article 5 in play here?
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Potentially, Article 4.
Yes. Yeah, Article 4 is just the discussions, the deliberations. Article 5 will be actual actions and response. So this is not the first time Article 4 has been triggered in years past. Since the second invasion in 2022 by Russia into Ukraine, there had been similar kind of incursions and threats by the Russians. But this one doesn't appear to be an errant or a mistake. It seems to be intentional, probing, but also probably trying to more to the point, testing the resolve or to try to form seams or fractures within NATO's, resistance to Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Certainly as Trump's about to ratchet up the pressure and hopefully also the cost on the battlefield for Putin's intransience and refusing to come to the negotiating table to end the fighting.
The EU calls it the most serious European airspace violation by Russia since the war began. And obviously, you don't want to get to Article 5. It's Article 4, Behnam. But, 19 drones. This isn't just one errant drone. And there's also all these internal politics. As I mentioned, President Trump will speak to Karol Nawrocki today, the president. But we know the Polish Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, was even sort of trying to put guardrails on the president as he came over here for that Oval Office meeting about a week ago. So there's a lot of internal politics in Poland. Very, very serious. And that's sort of the concern here, that you don't want to have any confusion. Everything has to be clear, direct, concise, and the right move has to be made in this diplomatic dance. What do you suggest happens if you were advising these countries?
Pleasure to be with you. No doubt national security policy is never going to be divorced from politics, but it would be a mistake for the Poles to put a ceiling, if you would, on the kind of assistance that they'd be seeking, not just from the rest of NATO countries, but particularly from the U.S. here. The U.S. has been warning about, Russia's incremental or graduated escalation when it came to these countries that are on NATO's periphery. That's really why the Ukraine debate matters in its entirety. And look, if we're going to be dealing with this issue, this is not just Russia poking and prodding and testing NATO and the West's air defenses and resolve. This is a larger question about China and Iran, which have really kept that unmanned aerial threat alive for the Russians over the course of 2.5 years now. What is NATO, the West, in particular, America's response to the supply side of the equation when it comes to these drones that do the testing and poking and prodding? So there's a lot of options for America here. I wouldn't want to be Vladimir Putin looking at what Donald Trump has to offer in response.
No, indeed. Great point there about the supply. So let's talk about the Middle East, because Israel just carried out, we've learned a short time ago, heavy airstrikes against the Houthis in Yemen. They've hit some military facilities, Brent, fuel station in Sana'a. Obviously, Iranian proxies here. They fired towards Israel singular drones the past few days here, though. And, this is also coming as the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said she'd seek sanctions against a partial trade suspension against Israel over the war in Gaza. So you've got Israel defending itself. Now the Houthis, sort of this desperate kind of attack, and after Doha, a lot of things in play here. And of course, the big question is, will there be a ceasefire?
Yes, I mean, the attack in Qatar is probably more consequential in trying to get Hamas to relent and put down their weapons. I mean, there is no future for Hamas in Gaza, and certainly the Palestinian people will be better off with a new future that doesn't include Hamas in it. And that's also in America's best interest as well, a future without Hamas in the Middle East. Now, as far as those attacks against the Houthis in Yemen, that's going to be unfortunately going on until the flow of weapons and support from Iran is cut off completely.
Behnam, we're tight on time, but want to get you to weigh in on that. Obviously, the Houthis have had a long civil war with Saudi Arabia that went on about 12 years, so not totally decapitated yet, still trying to flex a little.
That's right. Absolutely. The Israelis are responding to the, continued wave of Houthi aerial assaults on their own territory. But again, as Brett mentioned, it's critical to go after the supply side of the equation, and that's the Iranian-provided weaponry, as well as also to qualitatively improve the way Israel is engaging in deterrence by punishment against this group. It may not be enough to go after just the arms. It may not be enough to just go after the energy and the weapons depots and the launchers. It might be time to go after taking the Hamas and Hezbollah playbook to the Houthis and targeting the leadership and showing that there's a qualitatively different kind of cost to continuing to be part of the axis of resistance and engage in terrorism and target both commercial navigation as well as Israeli civilian targets.
Yeah, well, we'll be watching for that. Obviously, there is a big concern with what's happening and the potential for a ceasefire, and if it is still in play, and the thought of those hostages that they're still holding here. Behnam, Brent, great to see you both. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate your thoughtful comments also, as Poland is a developing story here. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.